You get out there, then you start, and then not knowing how much things cost to start up, you just think, okay, well, I just think about $80,000 will do it. I just think that that's good enough.
They take that technician mindset from, doing the actual work and then not recognizing what it actually takes to run a business, because you have to take off the technician hat, put on the owner hat or the entrepreneur hat, right? And still work on the business.
If you're not willing to put in your 16 hours a day at the very beginning, at least for the first 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to fall back a little bit.
Welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, Growth to Acquisition. I'm Adam Loveridge. I'm the owner and founder of Blue Forge Marketing. We're a home services marketing agency specializing in heating, air conditioning, plumbing, and remodeling contractors. For more information about Blue Forge, visit us online at blueforgemarketing.com.
Hello and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition Podcast. My name is Adam Loveridge with Job Calls. I am joined today by Kevin Kreutzer with Frinj Energy out of Corona, California. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Welcome. Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, Kevin, we're going to be talking today about really starting up, I think, and I know that this is a topic that is certainly something that our listeners are deeply interested in, especially those guys that are just getting started in HVAC or plumbing or whatever skilled trade it is that they're doing there in the home services. And and I'd love to really just start out talking a little bit about your story and kind of where you've been, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into this as we go. So I guess maybe kind of getting off the ground here then anyway, Kevin, tell me how you got started in this business.
Oh, well, I got started in the business about 12 years ago, coming from a different construction background that I've been doing for 40 years, on and off in different phases of construction. Anyway, things get slow here and there. You're always kind of, especially when you're doing new construction, residential. So things become like, you get tired of going through the motions where sometimes you're real busy, sometimes you're not busy. So then I have my roommate. He said, okay, well, you should probably try to find something that's kind of recession-proof business that's always it's always needed. And he says, because he used to do HVAC a long time ago himself. So he says, get into the HVAC business. So anyway, I just investigated that, and I go, and then you think about it, and that's correct. People need air conditioning and heating. They're always going to need it. So, and you can't outsource it. So those are the two things that I saw back then. You can't outsource it, especially not yet. I don't see robots doing it either, AI in the future, but who knows? Maybe eventually,
probably not.
Maybe 20 years from now, but I think it's going to be very difficult probably to do that. Too technical.
I'd agree.
But too technical and too manual. It takes a little bit. Anyway, and so then I just started going to school at a community college, just started, getting my hands. And this was I started this when I was like 48. So at 48 years old, I started the HVAC. From there, I started, like I said, going to school, started working for my first couple years for a small company in Riverside. And then I had a friend there. He left and went to Orange County, worked for a big company, started working for a big company down there. Then after 2 years, after I seen how it was with him, after a year, he says, after a year I'm there, and then, I'll get you in down here or whatever. So anyway, I just started with a big company in Orange County. And that was a good experience because then I started doing lead installs, and then I stayed there for almost 10 years, pretty close, I think 8, 9 years. And then in 2022, and then you get basically what I call the entrepreneurial seizure. That's what I learned later what it's called. But anyway, you think you're just going to run out there and just going to start. You're just used to doing side jobs and things like that, as a tech.
Is that to imply that you're going to have some fits as you get started?
Yeah, you may be a good technician and things like that, or good in whatever you want to call it. You could be a good installer, or a good technician, but and you're doing side jobs. You say, hey, this is good money. I'm making good money on the side. Why don't I just do this myself instead of giving it to the boss or the company you're working for? Of course, you're not realizing what's going on, of what they're going through. So anyway, you get out there, then you start, and then not knowing how much things cost to start up, you just think, okay, well, I just think about $80,000 will do it. I just think that that's good enough. So anyway, I had about 80 grand, and then started the business, and then you find out that really 80,000 is not that much. It doesn't go very
Oh
far
yeah,
starting a
absolutely.
business.
So Kevin, what was it for you then that made you want to take that leap? I know for a lot of companies, it's, I'm tired of working for somebody else, or I hate what they're doing and I feel like I can do it better. What was your big why in terms of wanting to start your own company and go into that fray?
I think the biggest why of why I left and wanted to go on my own was, you can make good money doing HVAC and owning your own business. However, the biggest motivator was I pretty much topped out of where I'm going to go with the company as far as your wages or in your salary, whatever, commissions and everything. I'm only going to go so far, that I saw, because it takes a while to move up into a
Yeah.
company that size. And the cost of living out here is a big deal too. You need to make quite a bit of money out here to survive in California. So the cost of living made me kind of pushed me out, even though again, you're comfortable where you're at. I had, the benefits, you're making good money where you're at. But you see the future is just not tenable to anywhere getting close to maybe possibly retiring or to live in so-called more comfort financially. At least being able to save and to be, and to have your own time too. I am 62 years old, so climbing around in attics is not a future for me. And running around doing, residential installing too many times, what you had to do, because I came
Yeah.
from the service.
Yeah.
Came from the service, then now I'm back kind of when you become an entrepreneur or businessman, now you just went back to installation again. After coming from service from where I was at, now I'm installing full time. Now I'm doing service full time, and I'm doing bookkeeping, marketing, and I'm doing everything. So I went from one job to 20, or more.
Oh yeah. All it's a whole different experience when all of a sudden you're wearing all the hats, isn't it?
No, that's big. That's big. It's huge, and those are things I don't think many realize, and the work it takes to do that.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
working in the field is hard
I
enough.
100% agree. Well, you have a dream and you have a desire, and it sounds like in your case that desire is, I want to set myself up for a healthy retirement, and ultimately, I think your body starts to just, you know, tap out, right? I mean, in terms of doing the actual manual labor, and I think getting out of the truck is a really really important goal. And you're exactly right in that, I go from being a service tech, having graduated from first being a helper, then doing the installs, then getting up to service, and now I'm back to just doing it all again. And and in my experience, that's where guys either make the leap, guys or gals. I mean, there's a lot of women that are starting to come into the trades as well, but I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. If I'm being honest, is that they take that technician mindset from doing the actual work, and then not recognizing what it actually takes to run a business, because you have to take off the technician hat, put on the owner hat or the entrepreneur hat, right, and still work on the business, as I'm sure you're already kind of aware of. But it is a tough transition, and I don't see everybody make that, if I'm being real about it. And they just basically wind up with another job.
It's correct. That's correct. It takes a lot. It's tough. Yeah, you gotta have if you don't have a good work ethic, if you don't have a good work ethic behind you, you probably in trouble. I mean, you have to have a huge work ethic to be able to sustain the hours that it takes. Yeah, if you're not willing to put in your 12, I'd say 12, 16 hours a day at the very beginning, at least for the first 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to fall back a little bit, because it takes a lot. Unless you have a bunch of, I would say, unless you're backed financially huge, where you can start scaling
Sure.
and hiring and what I call it, replacing yourself at certain levels.
Well, and it's hard to do when it's just company cash flow, I think, too, frankly, just from my own experience, right? Because you've got to have so much revenue and margin at the end of the day to be able to afford to bring on that next person, and then that next person after that. And I know that financing is one of the things that was kind of discussed in the pre-call interview for this, anyway. And so, tell me what struggles you've had in terms of cash flow and other challenges getting a business up and off the ground.
The cash flow, like I say, I started with 80, which time goes on, the first year that pretty much went away with all the investments that you put into your trucks. Then you're getting your CFM, your software, whether you're choosing House Call Pro or whether you're serving Service Titan, you're trying to determine which way you want to go. Then your website, your SEO services. I mean, these are expensive expenses. These are like $20,000 a year pop for each one. So you're basically, you could be talking, your SEO could be running 20, Service Titan could be running 20, or 10 to $20,000 a year. And then you got your PPC,
Right.
you got your marketing, you got your helper, your insurance, your workers' comp. There's a lot of things you don't really realize, and California is not a very friendly state for taxes, insurance. Is super expensive.
Employers.
And then, yeah, exactly. Then your employers, and then that's another thing. You got to deal with HR stuff, and are you compliant? If you're going to do it legitimately, I'm just into
Yeah.
I'm into doing it legitimately. I don't want to do things, on the side. Like you don't want the liability.
Yeah, under the table is not a good. It's not a sound business strategy, and I think especially too if you have any aspirations of exiting the business, and you've got just a whole bunch of undocumented labor. Good luck,
I've seen people get in trouble. I had a friend. He left the same company I did, and he didn't choose the good route as far as paying his taxes and all this other stuff. So he's kind of got himself in trouble his first couple of years, not paying the taxes and insurances properly. So he's finding himself getting big bills right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, they say don't take any lavish vacations until you're definitely established. And spend
for sure.
spend wisely.
Well, and to that point, how long has Frinj Energy been established? When did you guys start business?
Again, 222, I established it like it's a sole proprietor. Then immediately, probably not even 3 months, finding out that I should do be incorporated. Then I did incorporated right then, like 3 months later, like in 222 of November of 222. And then that was a C corporation. And so now you want to find out, then again, I have another friend. He does taxes. He's a CPA down in Newport Beach, big fancy guy, whatever. He goes, you're too small. You probably shouldn't even be a C corporation. You need to switch to a S corp. So,
LLC, S corp, yeah.
So he goes, an S corp's going to suit me better for what I need. So anyway, we just filed for that this year. So we're trying to get last year's to be an S corp, because it has the pass-through taxes. These are other things you're kind of
sure.
learning, and you're not taxed as
C
high as a
corps
C corp.
are big corporation type stuff for sure. They're relatively complicated.
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can do with the C corp, but he says they're not that big. That don't do it. So let's switch you over to C corp or S corp.
I would say that's pretty sound advice. So really, then over the last 2.5 years, what does your growth look like?
Ooh, at the end, like I said, I started at the end, so I probably didn't do too much. I mean, I probably did maybe about at the end of summer, August, the first 222. I probably only did maybe $20,000, $30,000, to finish the year off. Then that's when your first year in business in the off season, shoulder seasons hit. One thing you don't recognize is the phones die, and you're not going to get a call because we live in a climate that's not winter friendly. So forget the winter. You're not going to get any heater calls. You're not big enough. Nobody knows who you exist. They have no idea who you are. You're not even out there. So they don't even know your name, so you're not even out there. So then the second year I did 223. I did like 350 and 23. This
Okay.
is with me, just a helper. So about 300 some.
Yeah.
And then to last year, 225, I did a little over 5. So we're trying to gradually.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
So I mean, and I'll tell you, to make that 5 as a single person running a business with a helper, that's very hard to do. That's a lot of work to put into it. It's excruciating.
I think that there are, HVAC technicians out there who struggle to bring in $500,000 in revenue when it's just them and the truck and they've got no other responsibilities.
Right.
Trying to do that and run a business, and I mean, I've definitely known some, smaller HVAC contractors and worked with many over the years, and it seems like 400,000 is kind of like a respectable amount to hit on your
It,
own
it,
with
it
helper.
is. That's very respectable
Yeah.
if you get to that. And like I said, in the wintertime, your phones, if you're in residential, anyway, if you're in residential,
Mhm.
your phones are not going to ring in the summer, or the winter, the off season. Believe me, I've spent weeks. I could remember going like even 1 week without one phone call. So you you don't get one phone call for maybe 2 weeks. You get maybe one, and that might be a heater call. So that's not going to cut it as far as your expenses in your finances. So you kind of get
No,
antsy.
no.
It's a scary time when you're, oh my gosh, their phone's not even ringing. you know, so I mean, we know. I
Yep,
mean,
I do.
I knew
And it's cyclical.
yeah, I knew going into it, it was going to be a little rough, but I didn't know it would be that bad. Like not getting anything, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, the challenge I think you run into, no, you're fine. I think the challenge you run into is you don't also have the customer base to sustain you and support you.
That's correct.
I know that for many of the HVAC contractors that we serve, that it and we're Utah's a little bit different than California, and it varies state to state and where people are located, right? But we have two seasons. And I would say the summer season is probably about 70% volume of the volume that a company is going to do in a year, maybe 65, maybe 60 even, where the winter is going to be 30 to 40%. But man, those spring and fall times are just dead zones, and so I suspect that's probably a lot of what fair weathered California is in the winter too, is just that dead zone. And so it's not that you don't get no heat calls or anything else, but you've got to figure every other company out there, especially the big ones with big marketing budgets, are spending like crazy just to keep the guys busy. And again, without that customer base, that's probably going to comprise 50+% of your annual revenue anyway in terms of repeat business. It's like, what do? You know what I mean? You go out there and pay $500 a lead to compete with,
Yeah.
to compete with the big boys in the market, or and you, yeah. And so how have you worked around that, or have you discovered a strategy to kind of minimize that?
Yeah, I start when I started on the LSA local services ads through Google. I didn't do PPC at the very beginning, but I seen great success in 222, and that's when you've seen and then the next year that it happened, you've seen a big shift in the marketing PPC and LSA, where all the big companies started getting basically bought out by private equity firms. I mean, your big time players all sold. They sold out to private equity. And so, they have the $1 billion budgets probably, or, behind them, backing them for those ads. So they're basically getting the best ads
Right.
because they have the biggest ad spend. So the next year I just seen PPC, and sort of a lot of other people I talked to, they were spending a ton of money on PPC, but not getting anything. And just not getting any quality leads, because the quality leads were being funneled to the bigger companies that had the ad spend, because that's how it works. So that they were getting all the ads. People were complaining, I'm spending $4,500, some of them were spending that, a week or a day, some, and not getting anything, no quality leads. But the bigger companies, they're spending tons of money. They're I don't know what their budget is, but I'm sure it's extreme budget.
Well, I think actually you bring up a really good point too, and this is something that I don't get the opportunity to talk about all that often, but it's something that we talk about, with our clients routinely, which is, what is an appropriate marketing budget, right? And when you're talking with $100 million a year company, they'll tell you 5 to 8%, right? Usually 6 to 8 is fairly typical. And if you're doing $100 million a year and you're running a 6% marketing budget, you do the math, but that's $6 million a year, $500,000 a year, $500,000 a month rather, marketing budget. You know, you can make $500,000 a month squeeze pretty far. But when you're talking about $500,000 a year, that same marketing attribution rate as a percentage of revenue isn't going to be as relevant, because you've still got to build that book of business and you've still got to get out there. And so we typically will see, companies that are in those first few years of growth spending anywhere between 12 and sometimes as high as 20% of revenue just to generate leads. I don't think it's necessarily reasonable, but sometimes it does take that to really get there. But I think in those first few years of business, 12 to 15% is absolutely what you could and probably should expect. Well, Kevin, I think you're touching on a point that is really something that's important to understand, especially if you're in those early stages of growth. And that is really, at the end of the day, you've got to look at what is a percentage of revenue that you're ultimately going to spend to really get your message out there. And so when you're talking about a $100 million a year company, right, the average is probably going to be about 6 to 8%, because you can do a lot with a $6 to $8 million a year marketing budget. But when you're in that $500,000 range, or $250,000, and you're just getting started up, the numbers that we usually share with our clients are probably minimally 12, and we see some of them go as high as 20% of their actual revenue in terms of marketing budgets. And I think that the customer acquisition side of things is so vitally important to the long range success of a company. And what I know from having worked with HVAC contractors for many years is that customer base is going to usually be at least 50, if not sometimes 60 or 70% of the annual revenue that comes into a company. That repeatability, especially in HVAC, right? If you're doing it right, you're getting tune-ups, and you're it's like the dentist, right? You're going in twice a year kind of thing in spring and fall, and getting back in front of those customers, cross-selling, upselling, that sort of thing. And so I'm curious, have you found that percentage of revenue, if you will, or sort of, magic equation that's worked for you so far from a marketing perspective?
Oh, my marketing perspective. Yeah, well, like right now, I mean, I'm doing LSA ads, and I was doing Yelp and Angie's, but the door hangers. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the best what's the best marketing strategy to do. PPC, I did pause my PPC because I did find out that, that's the leads, they're pretty bad. I mean, that you're getting. I think Google does an algorithm of people that are, they shift those, the good buyers to the big companies that have the big budgets. And that's what I've been finding out. So I kind of stopped that. Even my SEO company even said that's what they're doing, as far as that's how they're doing it, where you would how would that be? As somebody clicks, like say on your ad for PPC, if you're not a known big company with all the reviews and stuff like that, they know the person that's clicking that ad, whether that person is by the way they use their computer and by the way they do things online, they know if they're good shoppers or bad shoppers. Like they know if this person's just a shopper, just looking around, versus somebody that actually buys, when they go to the sites. So anyway, it's kind of weird. So I was kind of shocked by that. Like that's how they would do things. So I don't know if that's ethical or not.
You're getting the price shoppers instead of the service shoppers.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're the lower budget. You're getting the shoppers more so.
I think you're right, to be honest with you. And I've noticed that too, where it's for some reason, if you're spending more money, you're getting better leads. And there's also something to be said too about the fact that Google rewards repeat advertisers. So whether it's LSA or it's, Google ads, and to me, LSA is such a great way to generate leads. Way back in the day, where job calls actually came from, is that we had a variety of assets out there, web assets, different things, and we would sell the leads that came in from that on a pay per call basis. And so what I love about LSA is that it does really leverage your reputation. It leverages the Google Ads platform in a very simple way to just send you those pay per call leads. But as you've already alluded to, if you're just getting started and you are trying to get leads from Google, whether that's through pay-per-click or whether that's through Google LSA, A, you're going to be waiting a while. B, you're going to spend more money than you need to. And C, you're not going to get the same quality of leads, because you're just, for all of those reasons that we just talked about, right? You're not a known factor to Google. It feels like with LSA, they put you in the sandbox for 6 months to a year and start to feed you out a little lead here and there. And it takes a while to start getting quality traffic from there. And so we really recommend to a lot of our clients, hey, you need other lead purchasing channels. Thumbtack, Angie's, I Home Advisor, right, is now an Angie, or they've merged anyway, I think is the point. But there are opportunities to buy leads out there. And one way or another, it's really just about customer acquisition. The challenge that I have with Thumbtack, the challenge I have with Angie's and some of these other, lead generators, if you will, is that you have to chase those leads down versus Google, where they're picking up the phone and calling you in most cases. And so, but I'll tell you, with a good CRM and a AI driven follow up cadence, it's not that hard to take those leads and convert them into customers. And then, of course, the name of the game is, once you've acquired that customer, you want to keep them forever, right? And make sure that you're, consistently providing value to that, to that customer base anyway. So it's a conundrum, man. I'll just be honest with you. And same thing with SEO. It takes a while to get up and off the ground. And I think that that's the biggest challenge for contractors in those first few years. Is it's like, what do you do? I'm still a huge proponent of word of mouth. I still do a variety of networking groups on a regular basis for my company. I encourage my clients to do the same. Some of my biggest and best clients have multiple people in B&I and other networking channels, right? So they've got their sales reps out there in addition to themselves and some of their upper management, because they understand just how powerful these more traditional advertising and marketing methods really are. And I always say that Google really, with their review system, took word of mouth marketing and put it online in the best way possible. And so there's no doubt that when you are showing up organically, and particularly in Google Maps with your reviews for keyword searches like, AC repair Corona as an example, those leads are going to be very, very good leads because they've crossed your reputation. But I think that there's certainly ways that startup contractors can get out there, develop a name for themselves, get reviews. The reviews are going to drive very, very heavily that local search algorithm. And if you get that game going really, really well and have additional lead channels that are flowing that in, eventually Google will work for you. And then there's, then we could start geeking out about AI and chat and all of these different things that are happening in the search landscape. But it's a tough experience, man. It's a tough challenge to get through. And so I appreciate your position and love that you are just scrapping it out anyway.
It's tough. You got to push through. You got to push through, though.
Well, and you've got obviously some goals for your business, and talk to me about where you'd like to be here in the next, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, between 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I would like to be at. I would say, since this is my third summer, so I think by the time I get into my fifth, sixth summer, which would put me into about, let's see, this putting me around five, at least puts me in there about 5-6 years. I'd like to see about at least 10. I'd like to be at least 10 million by then. Like I say, probably by the time I kind of want to make this, I do want to scale it as quickly as I can, as possible, humanly possible. I think by the time I reach, I'm 62, so my realistic goal is pretty much by the time I get to about 72, it'll give me 10 years from now. I mean, I'd like to see it hit about the $100 million mark, yes.
Okay.
Right in that range, right around that range. That's a goal. So, yeah, that's my goal.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's it's definitely an aggressive goal, and I think it's doable. As you've kind of thought about how you're going to get to, initially that 5-10 or that 10 million mark here in the first 5 years of business, and then eventually up to 100 million. I'm not even going to talk about marketing in this instance, but just asking you very directly in terms of people, what do you think those most important positions are that you're going to need to fill in order to be able to first hit that 10 million mark?
That's a tough, good talent as far as good techs. I'm gonna have to. I need good technicians and good installers and good technicians, which is very hard. That is a definite hard thing to find here. You're definitely going to have to headhunt and so-called try to acquire talent from other companies to see if they want to come over here, because that's basically the way you're going to do it. Or unless I just train, that's the long way to do things. But again, that might be a good way to it, because all you really need to do is duplicate. If you can just duplicate yourself once or twice, then they can duplicate that from there on out as you move along. But having good skilled technicians is huge, but good ones. being able to fix things efficiently, quickly, and have good sales skills. Because to have a good technician requires sales skills too, and those skills don't come quickly. A good technician is going to take 5 years to probably establish a good one. I mean, if you were trying to do that from scratch, from somebody who doesn't know anything, you need 5 years probably before you even become good.
Yeah, I mean, look at your own, evolution, right? In HVAC, you got into it coming out of, it sounds like general contracting. Started out probably as a helper, then started doing installs, then eventually started moving into service. Is that kind of the lay of it?
It is, and I started in the install phase basically as a helper, and I was at 2 years, basically very struggling at the bottom. Like you don't know anything, you don't know anything about the HVAC field, but I know it's good that I had a good, strong construction background because I could pick things up pretty quick. I knew the landscape of residential, all that kind of stuff in construction. That helped me out. But it was tough trying to move up because you're as a helper, you're coming in as a helper, you're doing a lot of attic work pretty much. If you're in residential, you're doing a lot of the grunt work for 2 years. For a couple of years, you're not going to see very much action. You see a lot of duct work.
Sure.
That's about it.
Right.
You're probably not going to touch any equipment for a little while.
I know many companies that has been the direction that they've gone. They don't feel like they can get good techs, or the ones that are out there that have been doing it for a while, kind of want to come in and run your business for you, or set things up to really accommodate them and their commissions they want to make for sales and all the other things. And so I know a great number of companies that are doing exactly what you've just talked about there, in terms of, hey, we're just going to hire guys off the street that are willing to work, that are hungry, that are willing to, and that we think will be loyal, and we train them up, in that exact fashion that you got trained up. And so, and then I would say too, that the real, and it just, again, working with a lot of HVAC plumbing companies over the last, 15 years or so, it's that service manager role, I think, is probably the second. It's like, number one, get yourself out of the truck. Number two, get a service manager, so that you're not actually managing all the technicians anymore. And I think that's a really, really crucial role, especially if you're trying to break the $2-3 million a year mark, because at that point you've got a handful of technicians, probably a full-time install crew as well, and it's that it's a management piece all in of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then plus, and then you also want to duplicate your CSR or your dispatcher too at the same time, because you can't rely on just one. You kind of need, I think you're going to need two. You're going to need a backup. Something ever happens to your CRM and you're not, and you could just see the mess that could create if you have a dispatcher and then they quit on you during summer. It'd be a disaster.
Yeah.
Especially learning the software, the CRM programs that we use.
It's interesting. Which one are you using, by the way?
Oh, I am using Service Titan. That's the other entrepreneurial seizure, little flashy woman in the red dress type of a thing that I probably should not have bought early on. Probably should have stayed with a more cost-effective method of doing your CRM, your software management systems, which is I won't name the names of everybody. Yes, I have Service Titan right now. Many more are a lot cheaper. Sure. Does the same thing, but I mean, it's good for growth. I Service Titan is very robust. It does a lot of things. I mean, it does have the opportunity to expand. They do have a lot of support. They have a lot of, lots of training things. They do have a lot behind them. It's just a very difficult program to operate. It's very tough, that I find out. And I find a lot of people too. I've had guys try it and they can't handle it. They just get rid of it. It's because it's too much.
At some point, I think they start with Jobber or House Call Pro or Field Edge or 3P, God forbid.
Yeah, that's what I use. I use P3.
More archaic softwares.
Exactly.
P3, yeah.
And actually, I thought P3 wasn't too bad. I mean, not as a CRM, but as far as their price book was good.
Yeah. Price booking and scheduling, it's great, but it doesn't integrate into anything. You can't automate anything from it.
Correct.
Trying to get reviews out of 3P. It's just it's a small nightmare, honestly. And
Yes,
so
that's correct.
we usually see people upgrade to Service Titan, at about the 3 to 5 million mark, if I'm being honest. And I've rarely talked to a company doing over 5 million a year in sales that isn't on Service Titan. So I think there's something to be said, for that when it comes to growth. We work in side of Service Titan and integrate into Service Titan, and it brings me back actually to a very interesting point that you made about CSRs. And you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that you like HVAC is it's not going to be automated, right sized, outsourced, roboticized. Is that a word? Anytime soon, right? AI is not going to take over HVAC work. However, it is going to take over CSR work, and we're already seeing that
You do see that.
now,
You do see
where
that.
there's some pretty good AI out there that will do your phone call answering. And it sounds pretty dang human. If I'm being honest, it's getting pretty good. So I agree that your CSRs are really, really important, and I think having people on the phones and having human connection there is really important. But if I were going to run an after hours call center whatsoever, I'll tell you at this point, I'd go AI.
That's what I was
really,
concerned. That's
really
what I
would.
was
And I
the
think that we're
question.
starting to see that.
That's the question I would probably ask or be concerned about too, is the automation part. I mean, I'm just maybe old school, but I know that if I hear, as a customer service person, if I hear an AI, which I know when I get a call from them, or I call and I know it's an AI in the slightest, I pretty much just hang up on them because I want to talk to somebody real. So I don't know if that's a landscape of people
Sure.
too. From what I gather, because I've asked people this several times, is they don't really want to talk to a robot either, because when they want when they're calling in dead heat summer, they don't want to talk to a robot. You better be able to answer their call and dispatch a technician pretty doggone fast, or at least get them on the schedule, or you're going to lose that call. And I think I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's something, maybe it'll advance better as far as the scheduling part. I guess they could, if they can schedule it out real quick, and it can just, yeah, I could see that. I mean, if they have that down to where they can schedule you, because I know they do with you have schedule engine through Service Titan and all that kind of stuff. As far as, yeah, if you can book that call and they'll book the call, yeah, I could see that, but they have to book it.
They do. And that's the point, right? Is you're right. They do have to book it. And some of the results that we're seeing come back on that, where, and we don't over here where, at job calls anyway, we don't implement AI voice agents yet. Uh, but it is something that we're starting to look at. And in terms of conversational AI, the thing that we actually see pretty regularly and have been implementing this is that somebody submits a form as an example. Okay. And I have noticed this a lot with millennials, but especially as you go down to Gen Z, and the 20 somethings, they would rather text with you than pick up the phone and talk to anybody. They're very like phone averse almost, and it's like, with the telephone, wait, you want me to call on the telephone?
Yeah, I get that.
But there, we can take, as an example, you brought up LSA earlier. Okay. We can take an LSA, integrate into LSA through different software platforms that we have that are AI enabled. And when you get a lead from from LSA, as an example, and it's going to be a text, right? It'll start up a conversation with you. Hey, what type of issue you're having going, and we'll literally schedule them with a service tech as long as they're integrated into your calendaring system. And so that can be done now. And as I've looked at different technologies for answering phones, I have noticed the two or three that I've checked out, there's a slight lag. And in fact, when I tested out one of these AIs just recently, I said, I don't know. I mean, my concern here is that there's a slight lag between the time that I quit talking and you pick up and say something. So there's a slight lag. And then the AI agent get back and says, I could really appreciate where you're coming from on that. And one of the things that we are really big on in our organization is making sure that we actually listen. So if there's a pause at the end of my thing, it's only because I'm making sure that I have completely heard and understood what you said, and I'm not talking over you. Does that make sense? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is what an AI bot just said to me in perfect English, and or perfect Spanish, or any language that I want it to speak in. And so it's going to be interesting to see how AI, I think, makes its way into things. But I do think that those CSR roles are going to need to be repositioned in a lot of cases, and we may not see that. Who knows? Who knows? This is all still very early technology.
Hmm.
I mean, AI wasn't really even around in a significant way 2-3 years ago, and now it's completely changing. I think many companies and whatever, and that wasn't necessarily the topic of what we were trying to talk about today. But I do think that when you're talking about hiring people, and throwing, human capital, and I'm old school too, and in terms of, nearing 50, and being a Gen Xer, right, and all of that, and so I still want to talk on the phone. I still want to, have a conversation. I want to still show up at a meeting and meet belly to belly with somebody, right? Like that is my normal way of doing things. But right now, I've got little AI agents that are doing all sorts of things for me.
Hmm.
Mundane, repetitive tasks. I have AI that does my scheduling for this podcast. So it works pretty dang good if I'm being honest with it. And so it is a trend. It is happening, and I would just encourage people, regardless of what business stage you're in. You don't have to have a call center with 50 CSRs to start really looking at where could we implement AI conversation, into our marketing funnels and different things to really start saving ourselves a lot of time. So I think that's really what AI does, is that it's left to its own devices, it does nothing. It's just a little rogue little thing. But man, if we can train that and get it to really do what it is that we want it to do, and have the same values, and really just, yeah, speak as we would speak. I think that technology is going to come really, really far, really, really fast.
Right. I think so
And
too.
that's just my 2 cents on it anyway. So Kevin, I have to imagine that you haven't been doing all of this on your own, and I'm curious, have you sought out any resources in terms of getting help along the way, or coaching or mentorship or things along those lines?
Yeah, as far as coaching, in my first year or about the first year, 2 years, I didn't do any like searching for coaching. I thought, I'm the technician again. I know everything. I know I can figure business out. Yeah, I may be technical. I can figure some things out. You kind of do your research. But yeah, probably coaching probably would have been a good thing to do, to seek out pretty much at the beginning. Getting advice probably right away would be good. But if you're thinking about starting a business in HVAC, I
Sure.
think you should have went to get coaching very quickly. Anyway, as I was into it for about a year and a half, then I went to a conference that my wife, we went to a church conference deal over here in Corona. Anyway, this is where I was, Ed Milet, people might have heard him in the space. Ed Milet, he's a personal development coach in his sphere. So I never had been on YouTube. I never knew anything hardly about YouTube. I never got on it. Except watch music videos a long time ago. But anyway, he showed up there. He was a speaker there, along with Tim Tebow and a bunch of other people, motivational speakers. He's a very highly sought after speaker. I mean, Ed Milet is. So I didn't even know who this guy was. But anyway, he really caught my attention as far as his just the way he spoke, the way his life is, and things like that. And then I just started seeking it out, watching his podcast, and I go, okay, this is something new. I had never seen any of these things, the podcasts and the personal development and business, and things that it takes to really build your personal growth along with it, that you need for business, for business too. And then probably about 6 months later after that, to 8 months, probably I listened to Ed for a little while after that. And then I kind of got my information from the business part of the field, that really somebody who dives deep into the business of things is Alex Hermosi. He's with acquisition.com out of Las Vegas. And Layla, that very, very, very detailed with the marketing and things like that, and how to run a business. So those things caught me. So I ended up going to I went to a workshop, acquisition in Las Vegas, about growing a business and how you should grow it, what your numbers, you should be looking at your numbers.
Sure.
And that's probably the first thing that I realized when I got there, that out of all, you had 100 business owners show up for the workshops. They have the thing once a month. Anyway, you get out there, and then what you really find out is everybody in business that you see there, they don't have numbers. Even if there's some companies that were even in the multi-million dollar business, they didn't have their numbers. They didn't have their CAC to LTV ratio, which is really stresses of making sure if you can't track your numbers, you're just floating in the wind out there. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what to attack. You have no idea.
What was that ratio again?
It's the CAC to LTV ratio, LTV to CAC ratio, cost to acquire a customer versus your lifetime value of a customer.
Lifetime value.
And
okay.
he goes profit.
Okay.
He goes not only lifetime value, but lifetime value profit overall. So yeah, you start to, but nobody had any of these numbers. So they might be tracking some things, but you really got to be diligent about tracking your numbers, probably right off the gate, of having a tracking system, knowing where your money is going, what's working, what's not working.
I agree.
And that's where I first learned from him too, which helped me out because I was getting very discouraged after moving out there. Man, my business isn't growing fast enough. It's just, I needed to grow faster than this. And basically he just said, listen, it's going to take time. He goes, when you start out in business, the one thing, because he's a YouTube, basically influencer, whatever you want to call him, is nobody knows you exist. Sure. This is what puts me in perspective now. When you first start out, nobody knows you exist. That's the problem. That's your problem. Until that happens, you're going to suffer for a while. It takes time to build a business. And realistically, he said you need 5-10 years of pain. That's about what it takes on the average, unless you're a SaaS. That's the fastest way you can grow as a SaaS company. But if you're kind of in the home industries business, it's 5-10 years for the average ordinary person. Some people, if they have the structure, they had the cash flow, they might have been able to scale it faster. But for the rule of thumb, basically, it's going to take you 5 to 10 years to see anything substantial. At least 5 just to even get good at business. So that's what I learned.
Well, I think having capitalization really makes a difference.
That's
frankly.
huge.
And that's another real hindrance, obviously, that that I'm sure you're aware of, right? It's like, hey, I want to do all this marketing.
I do.
But it costs a lot more than I've got coming in.
It does
in revenue. So yeah, how have you surmounted that?
Well, I've taken a pay cut. So basically, my pay cut is I was making great. Here's what I did. When I left my good job, I went from making pretty good money to basically went down to like a $2,000 a month salary. That's about what you're saying. You ain't living off $2,000 a month here in California. So basically, if I get commission, I pay myself a commission. Yeah, if I sell anything, I might earn $4,000 to $5,000 for the month, but that's not going to cut it either. That doesn't pay your bills out here. That's impossible. I mean, it's very, very difficult. So, yeah, capital. I mean, I've sought out loans and things like that, but it's really too expensive. It's very expensive. So basically, any profits that I get, I don't take it out of the business. I just try to keep everything I can in there, and just try to take them out of salary of about, he told me, and again, this is what's good for accountants. He says you need to take a reasonable salary, which is, he goes, about $2,500 a month, and then you can add commissions or distributions if you need that. But yeah, you want to just be keep your money in the business as much as you can. But capital loans, I mean,
I think $2,500 a month as far as a reasonable salary might be, like
it's a little low.
But I get the just getting started out thing. Oh man, I that's not a reasonable salary to me. If I'm being honest. But there I talk about Profit First quite a bit. Have you read that book by Mike Michalowicz?
No, I have not.
Well, I definitely encourage you to do so. And what I really like about that same basic thing, he's talking about. Pay yourself a reasonable salary, right, as owner's comp for the business, but then start taking, even if it's just 1% of sales, okay, put it into an account that you don't touch, that's not clawback money if we're having a bad month or whatever else, right, but it's this account that you don't touch. And then once per quarter, take half of that, pay yourself out from it, and then go ahead and just keep the rest, in there that can be used if needs be, sort of thing. But the idea is you start taking your profit first. And the truth of the matter is you're not going to miss 1% of your revenue, right. Or 2 or probably 3 or even 5, right? But that account will start to really, really grow And there's this thing called Parkinson's law, and the basic idea of it is that as your income grows, so will your expenses. And I've seen this in my business. I've seen this in every single business out there. I talked to somebody who's been wanting me to do their marketing for a while. That's similar thing in the first couple of years of business. And he's like, man, we had the best month last month, and I had an extra 15 grand, laying around from everything that we did, and I was going to get started in marketing, and then somehow it all just disappeared, and it was like, yeah, I hear you, man. That's Parkinson's law, right? Your expenses will always rise to match your income. And so, and this is, by the way, if you want to get into an even kind of deeper look at this, in finance, they call it the marginal propensity to consume, as opposed to Parkinson's law. And that's why, when the president of the United States wants to improve the economy, right, he can increase spending, increase, government spending, or reduce taxes. Either of those things puts more cash in people's pockets. And because people's expenses will always rise with their income, it stimulates the economy because they know that you're going to spend 95% of what you make anyway. And so it's going to raise that line up,
Right.
So just kind of coming back full circle then to the story of this particular individual. And what I suggested to him was, okay, start taking 12%. In fact, even just if you start taking 10%, okay, start taking 10% of the money that you make and stick it over into an account that you don't touch. Call that the marketing account. Let that build up for 6 months. And then, give me a call and you'll have the money to get started. And because you've already created the habit now of earmarking 10% of your revenue that you're going to put into marketing, and you've already made that sacrifice, I guarantee you will not miss that 10%. But it will not be there if you don't do some sort of mechanism, because otherwise you're going to run your business by your bank balances, and you'll look at it and go, oh man, we got plenty of money. It's totally fine for me to do this discretionary spending. And then all of a sudden, as you already know, fall hits, winter hits, we've got no money. What the hell did we do? And so it's that balancing act. And that's really my suggestion, I think, for small contractors in a very, very simple way. Okay. You don't need to make this complicated. Just start taking a percentage of your money